Welcome to the Healing Hour with Sarah O'Brien.
Well, how fun was that? The intro.
Yes.
I love that. That's the first time
You're
I got to see it, everybody. Because Jason does all this behind the scenes. So Jason has told me this is my show, so I get to introduce. So let me so I'm Sarah O'Brien, Sarah Fargo O'Brien. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I am the Chief Mental Health Officer for Circle of Friends Club. And every Thursday, Jason and I, and maybe some guests every now and again, are going to be doing the Healing Hour. So we're going to be talking about different topics in and related around mental health and mental wellness and mental health healing. And since I am a treatment provider, we'll be talking about lots of things that work within my practice, and then I see help with clients that I have, and then just stuff I have learned over the years myself, and from colleagues, and lots of learning, and hopefully giving the real deal, right, of like why we need healing, and then some options and some information that'll be helpful for everybody, hopefully every show. Today, we're going to be talking about attachment styles, and I'm going to run through sort of a brief overview of all four. I think Jason and I are going to take a deeper dive into attachment styles with some other shows. We'll get into some more details about them. Attachment styles are really interesting, and a lot of people maybe don't know what they are, what they're about, or how they affect things. And they do affect things and relationships so much. Anything that's not a secure attachment exasperates any mental health things that individuals have going on, relational things. So it's important to learn about for our own healing. It's been really important for my own healing. So I think what I'm going to start with, as I'm spitballing this whole thing as we go, guys, is I'm going to do a check-in at the beginning. Part of, being the chief mental health officer is making sure the executive team is in a good place. So I think it'd be cool if we just did a check-in, and this will also give a little bit of a demonstration of how I would facilitate a group. So we would always do a little bit of a check-in in the beginning, and then maybe an exit word or phrase, just to sort of close everything out. And so I'm going to try to do that around this show. So let's start with Jason. Let's do a quick check-in. How things been going? Give me a 1-2 minute rundown. Where are you at today? Mentally, emotionally, physically?
Well, mentally, I'm always dialed in, Sarah, when it comes to everything that I need to do with Circle of Friends Club and podcast production and all these exciting things that we have going on. I'm always focused. The first thing I do when I wake up in the morning is pray. And then go about my day. But that doesn't eliminate the challenges that we have.
That's right.
I still have the challenges. And like I told you the other day, I had a situation that I had to deal with.
Right.
Fortunately, thank God it was dealt with. So I'm in a good space right now. It's been a great week as far as the production and all the shows that we have coming out, including yours.
Right. Yeah.
So,
we have one just about every day, guys. So check our newsletter. Yep. Jason, that's going to go out Saturdays?
Tomorrow.
Fridays.
Yeah. Fridays.
Every Friday, the Circle of Friends Club newsletter is going to drop, and it is going to have our list of live events for the following week. So you want to catch that on Friday, subscribe to our newsletter. Jason puts an article in there, some other good information. We get to highlight people in our community. You'll get the whole schedule of events, some other things going on. You don't want to miss that, and the times of everything, and then how to access all of them on our live show. Well, I'm glad to hear that you are doing well, Jason, and that it was a good week and productive, and you are sort of on a roll. Sarah, how are you doing? Why don't we check in? This is where I'm at today, folks, as we do this live show. I just got off of a client appointment. I got very little sleep last night. Yesterday was my birthday, hence the hot pink today. It was sort of a roller coaster ride. Thank you. It was sort of a roller coaster ride. There was a lot of good, and then some not so good. And I am sort of in a weird place today, and not doing so great. And so that's the real. I sort of had to put all my stuff aside to be a therapist this morning, and I will this afternoon, and also to be here present on this live show. So, I will need to take some time later for some self care because I'm having to sort of compartmentalize my own struggles right now to be present. And so I like to bring that up as part of this healing hour because that's where things are. And 100%, work, treatment provider, whoever you are, whatever work you do, parents, whatever is going on, like the check-in is important, and you can be struggling with something and like not have space for it because you have responsibilities, but a little tidbit and something I tell my clients and I try to remind myself, compartmentalization is a coping strategy, but it is not avoidance. So compartmentalization is like putting this over here on a shelf and closing the door and saying like I really don't have time for this right now, and I can't really let it like derail me from what I need to focus on, but this is important and I need to come back to it. So compartmentalization only works if we come back to it. Because if we just put it in the closet and leave
Yeah.
it there, then that's avoidance. And then we're stuffing it down, right? So compartmentalization is a strategy. It's a skill to be able to show up and function the way you need in your roles and responsibilities, but not neglecting, excuse me, the stuff that you need to work on with yourself. So that's how I'm showing up today. I'm not in the best space. I'm having to put stuff on the shelf that I'm going to have to pull off later. And sometimes it's hard to do that, to dial in and be present. I've practiced a lot of that the last 15 years being a therapist, of like my stuff
Mm.
just can't be in the room when I'm being a therapist for other people. So I've gotten really good at the compartmentalization. Um, and it can be a part of somebody's healing if the skill and strategy is used correctly. So that's my check-in. I'm not in the best space, but I am happy to share the real deal so that other people can feel the same. The healing hour is not that
Mm.
we are healed, it is that we are healing. And so I am a prime example of somebody smack dab in the middle of healing. Okay, so
I gotta
excuse
tell
me.
you, Sarah, that I know this takes a tremendous amount of courage on your part to come out here and do this on a live, and be and be honest about where you are. That's not easy, especially when you're a therapist, a licensed therapist, and you have to do this work for other people. So thank you so much for doing what you do on a daily basis, Sarah. I could not be more thankful than to have you on our team, and also have you as a friend as well. I love you, and
I'm, I'm
I'm
so
grateful
grateful.
for you.
Me too, Jason.
Yeah, me too.
I appreciate you
Yep.
saying that, right? And that's the other piece, right? To healing, guys. It's like somebody's got to support you somewhere. So it's okay to be honest about it, right? Like
Yeah.
I have said to myself that and I've seen the meme for it too. Oh, I can't remember. Like I was sort of like drowning in silence, but I'm going to heal out loud, something like that.
Mm.
So this is me healing out loud and giving the honest truth that every day is not a good day and it's not going to be, right? So we might as well show up
Right.
authentically as we are. I'm not going to be able to show up the exact same way every week in the show because I'm a human being and we're just kicking it off right now to say that that's not possible and I can't be perfect that way. So if we show up authentically as who we are, it's not always the neat and polished and nice stuff, but it's really good for the nervous system to be able to be true and embodied in yourself with whatever you're feeling in the moment. And so a good old honest check-in that Jason and I just did here live is something that you can always do with yourself and just pause and say like, where am I at? Like where am I at right now? Let me just take a minute, to like try to formulate that. And so that's also a really good skill. It's like a little bit of a pause. We got some self reflection in there. We need to ask a question, maybe gain some perspective. So there's your little healing tidbit number one for today. Check in with yourself. Take a pause. Check in. See where you are.
That's
Ask
awesome.
yourself what you need. Ask yourself, Yeah. What do I have going on? What can I do? What do I need right now? So I've had to do that more and more. We'll jump into the attachment styles, Jason. So I did kind of a deep dive into attachment styles, and I wrote actually 5 blog articles on attachment styles, what they are, the origin of them, how they show up in adult relationships, how they show up in the workplace. And it's really been quite interesting for me, and as a trauma treatment provider and a trauma informed professional, attachment styles is a big piece of that in understanding how people show up in their space, how people show up at work and in their relationships. So let's talk about it. Okay. There are 4 attachment styles, according to John Bowlby, and Mary Ainsworth conducted a research study way back in the day, called the Strain Situation, to study attachment with infants and their parents. And they've come up with 4 main attachment styles. There is secure attachment, which is a healthy attachment with your caregivers. And that sort of looks like you can interact with them. You like having them there. The parent leaves the room. The child's kind of okay on their own, exploring things, isn't too anxious. And then the parent comes back in and the child is happy to see the parent and they reconnect. That is like the ideal situation, and that's secure attachment. And only about half the population get secure attachment. So there's like at least half of us that did not grow up with that kind of experience. So the 3 other attachments are considered insecure attachments, not secure. We have anxious insecure, anxious avoidant, and disorganized and fearful. So if I just give you a couple of statistics from what I found in my research, secure attachment is about 56% of adults, anxious avoidant attachment about 25% of adults, anxious insecure attachment about 19% of adults, and disorganized fearful is more unknown. It's less common, it's a smaller percentage, and not studied quite as much. So that's what we know about that. Jason, any questions before I go into some details about each of the 4 attachment styles?
As of yet, no. I'm
Okay,
good.
great. So let's start with anxious insecure attachment. Worry that others may not love them completely, become easily frustrated or angered when their attachment needs go unmet, worrying that people will leave them, often seeking external validation and tongue-tied, and reassurance, intense fear of abandonment. Anxious insecure attachment results from an unpredictable family environment or relationship with your caregivers growing up. I am a person with anxious insecure attachment, and it is from having mixed messages and a cold, invalidating household. So if that was me in the strain situation as a baby, it's going to my parent for attunement and then being very inconsistent about it or not giving it to me. And that's pretty much what I grew up with. It was not attuning to my emotions and telling me they were too big and too much, which sort of creates a confusing message. And there was not comfort or safety, seeking that out for my parents. So there's anxious insecurity in relationships. It's like, where do we stand? Do you care? You're not paying attention. You're not attuning, And so that creates a lot of anxiety in relationships for these individuals. Being uncertain where things stand, being uncertain how others feel about them. And it's, of course, not rational, but it's built out of their experiences. So this is their perspective. This is their reality. And it just kind of makes things difficult. And so this might be you. You might be somebody with an anxious, insecure attachment, and it might look like not being able to relax or find calm or peace when you haven't heard from your partner. Like that makes you anxious. Or if you have an argument that's unresolved, that might make you anxious, being unsure about where things are in the relationship. Those are some examples of that. Remember, that's like about 19% of adult population. That's a fair amount. If you think about that, that's 1 in 5 adults. 1 in 5 people have this kind of attachment, which is going to show up in adult relationships. Anxious, sorry, y'all, talking makes my mouth dry. I got to keep it going. Anxious avoidant attachment is, kind of almost the flip side of the coin of anxious insecure. So if you think about anxious insecure as like really focusing a lot on relationships and wanting to reach in and connect and make sure that things are okay, anxious avoidant is like almost the opposite. And it's just that they want to escape, avoid, evade, like not be a part of. That makes them anxious. Closeness in relationships makes anxious avoidant attached individuals uneasy, and distance in relationships makes anxious insecure attached folks uneasy. This is the flip side of that coin. So if we go through a couple of characteristics of anxious avoidant attachment, is that these folks appear not to care too much about close relationships. They prefer not to be dependent on others or to have others dependent on them. Have trouble getting close to others or trusting others. Don't believe their needs can be met in relationships. Maintain some distance from their partners, or are largely emotionally unavailable, and they have an intense fear of intimacy. So it's not like anxiously avoidant attached individuals don't want relationships. It's closeness in relationships creates a lot of fear in them. So instead they just avoid it. And don't really know how to navigate it with safety, right? The whole idea around these anxious and insecure attachments are that there is not comfort in relationships. There is anxiety of some kind. Things don't feel well in somebody's system or their body when we have one of these attachment styles. Okay, disorganized, also sort of also labeled as fearful avoidant, which I've tried to really separate out the terms so they're not confusing, but sometimes they overlap. All of the attachments have like, sort of variations of how it's stated. So disorganized, fearful, avoidant attachment is a combination of insecure and avoidant attachment styles. Folks with this kind of attachment style desperately crave affection and want it at all costs. And their attachment behaviors can seem inconsistent and oscillate between the extremes of avoidance and anxiousness. They have difficulty regulating emotions, oftentimes can have heightened sexual behavior and increased risk for violence in their relationships. Not necessarily perpetrating violence, but just in general, this being difficult. So if you think about anxious insecure attachment as somebody who is feels uncertainty that's really hard to tolerate if there's distance in the relationship. And avoidant attachment is a lot of uneasiness with closeness in a relationship. Disorganized oscillates between the two. That's how you can think about it. They want to connect. They don't know how. It's difficult. They avoid. Their behaviors are often confusing to the people around them. They're not consistent. So, and this is not their fault. So let me say that. Anxious attachments in anybody is not their fault. Attachments form starting from birth on, and it's really attached. It's really formed. Your attachment style is really formed and solidified as a child, as a very young child, given the relationship that you have with your caregivers. And so we're talking, yes, adults have these difficult behaviors now, but this happened when they were babies. Their caregivers did not care for them in the ways that they needed and did not attune to their emotional and physical and mental needs the way that they needed. It was maybe an abusive environment, emotionally, physically, sexually, may have been an invalidating environment, being, like I said, dismissed or shunned or made fun of or just not made space for, not made to feel important. This is not anybody's fault. This is what they lived with. This was their experience. These were the parents or the caregivers they had. They didn't choose this. They didn't choose to be treated like that as a baby. They didn't choose to have these attachment styles now. They did not choose to have relationships be difficult for them as adults. And we know from tons of other research that relationships are very important to healthy living in general. We're not meant to live in isolation and without connection. So imagine the difficulty for individuals with any anxious attachment and relationships, and this not being their fault, and knowing that having relationships is good for us, yet attachment comes with all this anxiety and uncertainty from a situation that we didn't have control over that happened when we were babies with our caregivers, right? So whatever you're seeing in adult behavior that's difficult, pause and say, could this have happened to them when they were young and didn't know it? Because this is what trauma does to people. It sort of warps how you develop, essentially, if it happens in childhood or in the developmental years. It warps the way you move through the world. It changed paths for you. And so things don't work maybe the way that they do for other people. And that is a really common theme in individuals with trauma, is like, things are hard. Life is hard. I can't seem to get it. I can't seem to make it work. I don't understand why things aren't working. I don't understand why people don't understand me, right? I don't understand why I can't have relationships that make sense. A lot of these are from very ingrained like beliefs and patterns of behaviors and what was modeled to them in relationships. So if your parents didn't appear to care about you and your feelings and attune to your feelings, imagine how difficult it would be to enter into any other relationships at life and have a belief that somebody's going to attune to you and care about your needs when your own parents didn't. That's tough, folks. Like, it's a tough place to try to get to bridge the idea that my own parents didn't care enough about me to attune to me in the way that I needed, or they abused or neglected me in some way, which is also not attuning to the way that you needed, has created all this difficulty in adult relationships, ultimately leading to loneliness, non-healing, potentially mental health, getting worse for people, and feeling stuck. Like, I don't know why this happened. This isn't my fault. I didn't ask for this. Yet this is very difficult for me to navigate now, and I'm not sure what to do. And then you pile that on top of a world that doesn't have a sensitivity for individuals' lived experiences of trauma, for people's insecure attachments, for people's difficulty in relationships, then basically we're talking about like explosive issue, right? And what I mean by that is just like a bunch of dysregulated emotion and people struggling to find themselves, to find their place, to find healthy relationships. We could probably talk about this a lot in terms of divorce rate and like relationships that fail. I could probably look at a whole bunch of divorce cases and maybe circle it all the way back to attachment styles that are unhealed or opposite, and like you can't figure out a way to connect. And it leaves people sort of like feeling like there's something wrong with them and unsure what to do. And I want people to understand that just because you have an attachment style that you don't want, or that's one of the anxious ones, you don't have to be stuck with that attachment style. There is healing for attachment style, and it requires a lot of recognition, a lot of self-awareness about where you are, and then a lot of work to walk back some faulty beliefs. And I know they feel true. They feel true for me too. It's hard to get out of the belief that I'm either too much or not enough, when that's the message I got from my parents my entire life. Like it's not easy to break out of that. It takes work. And that work is not easy work. And a lot of times it's painful because you have to like confront all of this stuff. And then oftentimes a lot of the negative impact from this stuff, for anybody that's not been aware of their anxious attachment style and then been in a relationship, and then the relationship, I don't know, somehow has not been great, caused pain, ended, whatever, and they're not aware of their attachment style, you know, it's really easy to think that you're wrong or at fault or this or that. And it's not that people can't take responsibility for themselves, but if you really have not been aware of your attachment style and there's difficulty in relationships, well then all of that is just going to be confusing and really painful. So you can understand your attachment style and you can heal from it, and you can get to a place of having secure attachments in relationships and having healthy relationships as a result. This is something I've been working on in myself, especially, doing a deep dive into researching this stuff. I have found it fascinating and interesting, and also interesting to learn about my own self and my spouse. And yeah, we're classic people that have opposite attachment disorders, mostly born out of our early childhood trauma. And I will be quite honest, it has made a relationship very difficult. Um, and it requires a lot of self work and a lot of conversation and a lot of grace and consideration and care, right? And this idea of empathy and people's ability to have their own authenticity and the sensitivity, like I was saying, in my ideal trauma informed future, that there is space for all of that and for people to not feel isolated and iced out because the way that they relate with other people in relationships is difficult. At least half of the population has that going on, where it's difficult for us to relate with other people. And, you get two people like that, and it's like, well, damn, like this is hard. It's hard to be in a relationship if nobody's feeling secure, if there's anxiety, if there's fear, if there's uncertainty, if needs aren't getting met, if there isn't attunement. And then we pile on top of it, like, I didn't know that about myself. Well, where that's going to turn out, we just repeat cycles that are in patterns that we're unaware of, and when you become aware of it, that's just the first step. That's recognizing everything up to this point. But awareness is the first step to making it a change, and it's not easy. And where I end up a lot of times is like pissed off. Like, I didn't ask for this, I didn't want this, like my family did this, but I have all this work to do now to get myself to a healthy place and to get my relationships to a healthy place. But do you want it? I've been working on it my whole life, and trying to heal and make my relationships better and learn about myself and learn about relationships and learn about trauma and learn how that shows up for other people. So I can also have a more sensitivity for myself and have self-compassion and be able to extend that to others when they engage in unsavory behaviors that hurt me. None of us are perfect, right? I'm a recovering perfectionist myself. And that's the hardest. So other tidbit here for anybody that's struggling with perfectionism, self-compassion is the way. And it's hard to be self-compassionate when you're trying to be perfect all the time, but practice that, folks. We can't be perfect, be included. And self-compassion is a great skill to cultivate, as well as an understanding and recognizing and potentially healing from your attachment style that is insecure or anxious. We have to have self-compassion for what we've lived through, what we've been through, and the result of that, which potentially might be a negative impact, might be a big negative impact. And you can still have, and you may not like, what that's done to you or how you behave or how you show up or whatever. And you can still have compassion for yourself in those moments, given what you've lived through. And if you don't want to stop there and you don't like where that leaves you, then you can do more work on yourself, it's available to you to continue to learn and grow and self-reflect and be aware. So, attachment styles are really important in relationships and at work. Pretty much at any place there are people, like, attachment styles will show themselves. Let's give a little bit of information about secure attachment. Okay, so you got Anxious, insecure attachment, anxious, avoidant attachment, and disorganized attachment that looks like a little bit of mix of both. Secure attachment, you can imagine, direct opposite of all of those. So if we go through some characteristics, those with secure attachment feel confident that their partners will be there for them when needed. They're open to depending on others and open to having others depend on them. They're able to trust others and be trusted. They do not become panicked when their partner or anyone they're in relationship with needs space from them. This is the crux of security. There is not anxiety in relationships. There is not fear. There is not unknown. There is not uncertainty. That's what secure attachment is. And let me tell you, folks, if you have unhealed trauma, it's going to be hard to do that, and if you're trying to attach in a healthy way to somebody else who doesn't have a secure attachment, that's also going to be hard because their attachment stuff is going to come out. It's going to be obvious that it's not secure. Like I said, we can get here, so don't be hopeless, but understand that it's not a quick turnover. It takes work to recognize what things have been ingrained and what patterns you have as a result of the attachment style, how that plays out in relationships now. Having self-compassion for what you don't like about that, because I can guarantee you, if you hold up a mirror to it, there are some things you're not going to like about your own behavior. You can still have self-compassion and you can still work on healing your attachment. And there is still, possibility that you can have healthy and secure relationships and those attachments, but it is going to take work. And okay, here we go. Tidbit number 3 for today. The work's got to start with you. Self-work is really important. If I self-disclose here, I've been in therapy for over 20 years, folks, and I've been a therapist for almost as long. So it's hard for me for somebody to say, hey, that's not for me. And it's like, how do you know, man? This stuff takes a long time. I've had different therapists. I've had many therapists. I've had some for a short time, some for years at a time, more than one, it depends on where you are in your journey, but don't give up on yourself and don't shoot yourself in the foot by saying this isn't for me. If you're actually recognizing somewhere that you're struggling, you're in control of you. You're in control of the work that you put into you. You're in control of how you show up in your relationships, not how other people do, but how you do. So I think it's really beneficial, Jason, for everybody to understand their attachment style, to learn about it, to read about it, to label it, to figure out what it is, and then to really look at their own behaviors and relationships and say, yeah, where do I see this come out? Is that working for me? Is it not? Let me check in with myself, right? Like kind of like we did at the beginning. What does that mean? I think the other issue with a lot of this stuff, Jason, and as we talk about the mission for Circle of Friends Club and bringing people together and having community and connection and ending adult loneliness, is you got to do the work. And with the busyness, the hustle and bustle, the productivity, if you're ever here in the West, it's capitalism and consumerism that just keeps you going. It's work, it's work ethic, it's work demands and expectations. It's hard to take time to work on yourself, to pay attention, to self-reflect, to check in, to go to therapy, to make the time for it, right? That's what it requires, though. You're going to have to slow down and make room for yourself and not make excuses about everything being busy all the time. And there might be some other consequences to that. I myself have experienced that as I've had to cut back on some work, which has affected my income, but needed to do that. And for one of the reasons is to heal my attachment style and to really do a deep dive into my own trauma healing. Is it ideal? No. Does it sometimes cause other stress? Yes. Is the work important to me? Yes. And that's why I'm here doing it, and nobody else can tell me the work is important to me. I have to tell me the work is important to me. So that's the same for you, but don't shoot yourself in the foot by saying, I don't have time and I'm so busy and all this. It's like, nothing is ever going to change that way. And if there's any part of your relationships that are like not working, or you don't feel attuned to, or are stressful or causing a lot of anxiety, Are you taking the time to do your own work? I guess to figure out like where that is. And people may say yes, but it's not just like a gratitude list at the end of the day. Like you got to carve out some time to self-reflect and spend some time with yourself and consider where you've been and where you are and what you know about yourself and where you want to go and what your goals are. And I'm a person, that's super focused on relationships, and I've had many goals for relationships for pretty much my whole life. Like a lot of my goals have been around that. And you have to want that, that kind of has to be a goal. I have plenty of other goals. I have professional goals, Jason, those. Um,
Yeah.
but relationships and wanting to work in relationships and have healthy relationships has to be a goal for you if you want that to be true. A lot of times it's not just going to happen. Let me repeat again. At least 50% of the adult population does not have a secure attachment. That means relationships do not come easy for these people. And if you are not actively working on it, then they're never going to be easy. And you have to actually carve out space for this stuff. And that's not easy either. And I know people, parents, I hear you. People that work multiple jobs, I hear you. I know. But you're either going to do that, rinse and repeat and then die, or you're going to take some time to figure out what matters, where you are, who you are, what's important, set those goals and find your people and get going. And that's what I hope for people. And I know with Jason and I in Circle of Friends Club, that's our hope, right? Is that we can bring
Yeah.
people together, hopefully develop healthy relationships, at least feel seen and heard in your shit and in your mess, until you get to a healthy place, right? And actually get to that for you, get to that healing place for you. But let's start with learning and understanding our own attachment style and accepting that that's where we are and that's not our fault, that that's what happens, and we can have
Mm.
compassion for how that's negatively impacted our lives.
What you said is so impactful. And God, I think that, for so many people, they're just completely unaware that
Yes.
they have an attachment style.
Yep.
So I think that's half the battle right there, is becoming aware that you have that. And then, like you said, having compassion for yourself, for some of the relationships that, you have actually self-sabotaged because of your attachment style. So
And
there's
probably
so
didn't
much
realize it. Let me put that
yeah,
in there. You didn't realize it. This is not blame on people. So if there's any like self-sabotaging your relationships is often like I am unaware of how my either early experiences or trauma has impacted me. It's like not in view, right? Like it's living in our bodies and we're like living things out, but yeah, not in conscious awareness. So
right.
yeah, we tend to do that and completely unaware. And this is where, I get on my little soapbox about trauma informed, right? Trauma informed principles and practices. This is where that comes into play because those people are hurting. 50% of the population is hurting if they have this attachment style. And if we don't have a sensitivity to people's lived experiences of trauma or things that were traumatic for them, then we are all running the risk of causing more harm in the course of doing business, having friendships, conducting relationships, meeting new colleagues, whatever, trying to get clients or customers or things for work. We all run the risk of causing more harm if we don't come from things from a trauma informed perspective, which is the idea that how you interact with people matters based on your understanding that anybody and everybody could have a lived experience of trauma and that lived experience of trauma is unhealed. It's
Yeah.
not an assumption that people are in a good place with it. In fact, it's maybe an assumption that people are in a bad place with it, and hence the reason for a lot of the sensitivity. So, that's hard for me too, especially when they're unsavory behaviors. I think about a lot of stuff in my family, in my relationships, with my family of origin, and a lot of anger, a lot of yelling, a lot of arguments and stuff. And I don't like those, but I fight with the best of them too. And it's definitely, due to trauma and attachments, and nobody likes that. Who wants to argue? Who wants to fight? Who wants to yell? Who wants somebody cursing at
Nobody.
you? Nobody.
Yeah.
Nobody wants that. But I can't tell you how many times I've been guilty of that. And I don't like it when somebody else does it to me either. And I still do it, and some of that is difficulty in changing the pattern, that's been so ingrained. And that's always what I'm trying to get out there, because it pisses me off too. I want to get on my self-righteous high horse of anger and be like, screw him. Like, my sibling, my family member, whatever, like talks to me like this, probably out of their own trauma. I mean, I know that now at this point in my life, whether they've done their own work or not, I know that's where it's coming from. And yeah, as ugly as it is, we have to have space for that. We have to
Yep.
have space for people to be fucking up, basically. That's what I gotta say. Gotta have space for it. Um, but you also have to come to it honestly and genuinely, and you can't repair anything if you're also not doing your self work. So, somebody can't bring it to your attention that your unhealed trauma has caused some unsavory behaviors. And then it's like, oh, I'm sorry. And then whatever. No, there's got to be like work then in repairing, even though you didn't mean to, didn't intend to, and it's not your fault that you maybe have these behaviors because this all happened when you were a baby and you didn't realize it. Yeah, all that is true. And it may have not been intentional, but there still may have been damage incurred. And so you still have to do your self work, even when you didn't mean it, right? Even when I didn't mean to be mean or yell or flip out or go off or whatever. Like it was a reaction, it was a fear, it was a defensiveness, it was a protective. I had tons of those because I have tons of trauma.
Mm.
And they come out fast, like real quick to protect. I don't even have to think about it anymore. My trauma protectors come out so fast, it's like I have to reel them back in and be aware of that. They are quick to protect me. And let me tell you, if my behaviors are coming out quick to protect me, you are not going to like them, because they are not intended to protect you. They are intended to protect me. And for me, and I've said this before, and I said this in our Freedom Fight Expo for healing from PTSD, in our other podcast, Jason, where I was talking about complex PTSD, and in many of my posts, anger and rage is mine. That is what
Mm.
I was left with as a protector. You could ask anybody who knows me well. Um, and I don't realize it a lot of the time. It's fast. It just comes out to protect me right away. And man, that's a lot of self work, right? Like, first of all, you have to
Mm.
recognize it's doing that.
Right.
Then it has to be a problem for you, because for a long time it wasn't. It was like, this is what saves me. This is what protects me. This is what keeps me going forward. And I have been honestly super grateful for my anger, because it's been my motivator. It's how I've gotten to this point. It's it's fueled me still standing instead of, breaking. But
Mm.
that's not going to help me in relationships. That just helps me protect myself from pain,
Yeah.
you know. But man, that's hard work, right? That you have to look at that and say, okay, I know where this comes from. This isn't my fault. I know it's done a good thing for me, right? Like, this thing comes out, it's done a good thing for me up to this point. It's maybe protected me, saved me a bunch of times. But it's not helping in my relationships, like once I finally become aware of that. And then guilt and shame wants to come in, folks. Hear me on that. I know that's going to happen with you. It happened with me. And then there's that self compassion to walk it back. This isn't my fault that this is where I'm at, but I recognize this is where I'm at. So if I want a different result, I'm going to have to do something different. But that's also a
Yeah.
desire and a willingness on my end. You've got to want to do something different, or you've got to want something different. If you just want to continue to like be in yourself protective, then cool. But I don't know what that might look like for you. And
Well,
um
you know what? I think that causes a lot of loneliness with people.
yeah,
They don't want to be lonely,
right.
but the thing that's causing that is their unawareness that they have these kinds of reactions.
Yeah, and we live in a I don't know. we live in a culture that doesn't value self accountability as much as I would like it to, and
Yeah.
everybody kind of wants to pass the buck, right? Like it's because this person did this to me or this happened or da 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 da. Da. And I'll say all those things too. And anybody that knows me, my best friend for sure, I'm behind the scenes working my ass off to do something about that once I'm aware of it. It doesn't matter what you see on the outside. If the same behavior is repeating, I am working my ass off on the back end to address whatever I've come to recognize, about myself that it is maybe still a roadblock or a barrier, working my ass off to heal so that I can have healthy relationships. It is not easy, folks. It's not easy for
Yeah.
me either. Um, and my therapist is great, and thank God for him. Um, right? Like so, and my clients say that about me. Thank God for her, right? Like, yeah, I couldn't do this without him, which is why when people are like, "Oh no, therapy's not for me," it's like, how are you doing this, folks? How are
Mm.
you doing this work? And that's where I get to like, you're probably not. And then we get to the whole stigma of mental health and mental health treatment, right? And if everybody's just going to say, that's not for me, that's weird, I can't go to mental health treatment, so I'm not going to work on that for myself, what are you going to do? You're just going to keep replicating things that cause problems in relationship. And then you're going to keep saying it's because this happened to me. And then there's no self accountability.
Yeah.
And trauma informed takes that stance too. You got to be self accountable. Do we make mistakes? Yeah. Are we going to hurt people? Absolutely. We are imperfect. We are going to do it unintentionally. And you have to be accountable to that, and if it's really important to you to not repeat those patterns, then it's going to take some work to walk all that back. And that has to be your work. You have to be dedicated to that because it's going to take work and it's going to be hard. And if you are not motivated to do it, it just won't happen.
Sure.
Um, and so you have to, also take responsibility for your own healing journey. It's not going to come unless you do it, unless you work at it. And I, for one, would not be able to walk this road without a therapist at all. So I'm a therapist in therapy, complex PTSD, anxious, insecure attachment, a whole lot of relationship problems. And it's okay. You can be that too, and you can go to therapy too. And mental health therapists hear me, like you can also go to therapy too. It shouldn't be a stigma. It's it's a healthy action, and recognizing where either you're unhealthy or not who you want to be or not where you want to be, or that you have unhealed trauma or unaddressed symptoms of a mental health diagnoses. There should be no shame in seeking treatment for that. And if you don't, you're really doing the public a disservice by not addressing your own issues and doing your own self work, because then you just repeat things that are problematic and then say, well, I don't believe in therapy, so I don't have to do anything about this. And that's a problem for everybody around you. So if you're refusing to do your own self work, you're probably causing harm.
Absolutely. Sarah, thank you so much for everything that you shared today and for showing up, even though you're dealing with some challenges yourself. Um, Thank you so much for wanting to host this show. So
Yeah,
we will
I'm
be
excited
back.
about this. Yeah, we will be
Yeah,
back. I'm excited.
me too. Yeah, there's so much to unpack about the attachment styles that we're going to continue this conversation next week. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for checking us out today. We will be back next week. Take care.
See you guys then.